Chris Godwin is back and the Bucs find pass rush help. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into this live episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. We are going to get to the signing of Haason Reddick shortly, and we are going to talk about more remaining free agents that the Bucs could pursue, some of my personal favorites. But let's start with the headliner here, and that is, of course, Chris Godwin. For those of you that watched or listened to yesterday's show, you know that I was beginning to come to terms with the fact that I thought Godwin had one leg out the door. There was a lot of news coming out about the market that he had, the amount of money he was going to be offered, and I honestly just started to think that they weren't going to be able to make it happen anymore. You had Diana Rossini saying that the plan for him was always going to be to test free agency. I am more than happy to come on here and talk about how I was wrong, because while the Bucs could not have matched the money that he was reportedly offered, they didn't need to. The Bucs agreed to a 3-year, $66 million deal with Chris Godwin with $44 million guaranteed. And according to Ian Rappaport, Chris Godwin left $20 million on the table from another team in order to return to the Bucs. That team, it appears, was the New England Patriots. We talked about that on yesterday's show. The report that New England was willing to offer upwards of $28 million a year for Chris Godwin. You do the math, that's probably about what it was. Instead, he takes the $66 million from the Bucs, and all of this went down less than 10 minutes into the start of the negotiating window opening. So Jason Light, in a statement, said, quote, "Chris has been crucial to our success, and we are excited to ensure he remains a part of our offensive core into the future. He has an unparalleled work ethic, is a tremendous leader, and is a pro in every sense of the word. His versatility, combined with his playmaking ability and consistency, makes him a perfect fit for our offense," end quote. This was huge. This was absolutely huge. There's no other way to put it. And while I do believe that the Buccaneers could have succeeded offensively without Chris Godwin, they would not have been nearly as efficient nor as dangerous as they are with him. I know last week I talked about Tyler Lockett as my free agent replacement preference if Godwin were to leave, and I like Lockett a lot. He's one of my favorite receivers in the NFL. I feel that he has been criminally underrated his entire career, but he still isn't Chris Godwin. So let's run through this real quick. Godwin went down in Week 7 last year. Obviously, that was the Monday night game against the Baltimore Ravens. Mike Evans went down earlier in that game. But at the time of that injury that they decided to replay on NFL Network and caused me to throw up in my mouth a little bit because it's still disgusting. But at the time of that injury, he was first in the NFL in receptions, second in the NFL in yards, third in the NFL in touchdowns, and he was the third highest graded receiver in the league, according to PFF. His success rate versus man coverage last year through those 7 weeks was the highest it has been since 2020. He was on pace for by far the best season of his career across the board, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Now he gets to stick around in a similar scheme, playing in a similar role, and should have similar results. Baker has to be over the moon with excitement. So do Mike, Bucky, J-Mac, Todd Bowles, and of course, Grizzard. The Patriots were willing to make him a crazy high offer. The Packers were in on him. I have to imagine that other teams were as well, but this speaks volumes about the Buccaneers as an organization. For Godwin to turn down that kind of money, and I know it's been brought up a lot, you can throw the state income tax thing out the window. I know that does play a factor into some of these decisions, but not $20 million. Even if he was going to the state with the worst state income tax, he would still be making more than he will be with Tampa over the course of this deal, because we're talking about $20 million. That is an insane amount of money to turn down. But it speaks to where Godwin thinks this team is. It speaks to his love of the organization, his love of his teammates, the city, the community. This is all incredibly significant. This shows that he believes that he could win another Super Bowl with this team, and that's why he stayed. Maurice Jones-Drew said it best on NFL Network. It was around 1:30, but he said, you can make a lot of money, but that money isn't going to stop the pain of those losses you're going to suffer. And I thought that, coming from someone like MJD, who, had success and also had, a lot of failures with the teams that he was on, that speaks volumes. So, I'm sure, having called Tampa his home for his entire adult life, that he and Mariah have put down roots here and are now raising a family in Tampa. I think that has to play into it somehow. But when I heard that he left $20 million on the table, walked away from it to stay, that you can't ask for somebody more dedicated than that. Now, as I will probably say a half dozen more times over the course of this show, in the next couple of shows, it's not officially official until they put pen to paper. And the Bucs still need to clear some cap space, but they have until Wednesday at 4:00 to officially be cap compliant. So they're going to make a couple moves, a couple of restructures. It's going to be pretty easy for them. And of course, this means that the Bucs can now spread out that $18.9 million in dead money that was going to hit Wednesday at 4:00. That frees up $11 million in cap space for this year. Obviously, the restructures will be happening over the course of the next day and a half. They've probably already started on those and will be announced, obviously sooner rather than later. But I would also love to come on here and talk about them extending Mike Evans as part of the cap clearing process, since he is once again entering a contract year. Going to jump into the chat real quick, which is not something I've said in a very long time. I'm so glad to be doing this live with you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Scotty J, Insider Scotty J, that's my dude. Our three wideouts are the NFL's best. Am I wrong? I wouldn't say you're wrong. I would say that it's probably a conversation that could be had. You could look to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. They have a really strong wide receiving core. You could look to the Cincinnati Bengals, although I do think that Chris Godwin is much, much better than T. Higgins. There are a couple, the Washington Commanders now. You can look to the Commanders as probably being a team that's going to have a really elite trio of wide receivers. But yeah, the Buccaneers are towards the top of that list without a doubt. I did see somebody. Oh, here it is, Matt. What are the Buccaneers' priorities now? As far as like the draft is concerned, I'll talk more about that coming up, but you're still prioritizing an edge rusher. You're still prioritizing a linebacker. You're still prioritizing a corner, probably a safety, probably a wide receiver. You're still looking to those same positions. But as far as free agency concerned, coming up in a little bit, I will talk about which players I still think the Bucs should pursue, my favorite remaining free agents as of this live episode. But the priorities remain the same. You're still prioritizing the defensive side of the ball. You're still trying to upgrade some of those positions that lacked last year, and you're still trying to find reliable depth throughout the defensive side of the ball. Let's see. Demon Hunter says, again, can we give Ben his flowers? Congratulations, big man. I will be talking about Ben as well as the help that is coming on the defensive side of the ball, as Chris Godwin was not the only splash that the Buccaneers made on Monday. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and more affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it is the world's largest online therapy platform. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, take a moment and join me here in the Locked On Bucs time machine, our very own DeLorean, and let's rewind to last summer and the early part of the 2024 NFL season. I did not one, but two different shows about how the Bucs should trade for edge rusher Haason Reddick. The first time, he was with the Eagles, and I said that was a move that would help the defense immensely. Randy Gregory had been a no-show since his press conference, and it looked like the Bucs were going to be thin at edge rusher. Reddick, to me, seemed like a no-brainer. Then early in the season, when the Bucs very clearly were thin at edge rusher because Randy Gregory never showed up, I talked about Reddick once again. At this point, he was already on the Jets, and they were doing him dirty because they are a disastrously run organization. He finally got things worked out with them, and he showed up playing just 10 games and only starting 2. The Jets managed to completely botch the addition of a player that had double-digit sacks over the course of the previous 4 seasons. He had 12.5 in 2020, 11 in 2021, 16 in 2022, and then 11 in 2023. Last year, he finished with 1, yet still has the 6th most sacks in the NFL since 2020. In 2022, he was a Pro Bowler, a second-team All-Pro, and he finished 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. In 2023, he was once again a Pro Bowler. This is a player that immediately impacts the Bucs edge rush in a major way. He is entering his age 31 season. He is only signed for 1 year, worth up to $14 million, $12 million guaranteed. So the Bucs are not done adding edge rushers. They're still going to draft one. They might still sign another one in free agency. But this is the compliment that they needed on the other side of Yaya Diaby. His defensive grades on PFF from last season were way down, but he was on an all-time heater from 2020 through 2023. Again, I point to the Jets' dysfunction more than Reddick's actual ability. On top of all of that, he's now reunited with Larry Foote, who he played for back when he played in Arizona under head coach Bruce Arians. So he's already more than familiar with his position coach in Tampa. Another reason that this particular signing makes a ton of sense. And while this does, I'm sorry to say, everybody, take the Bucs out of the Trey Hendrickson sweepstakes, it is a great move for Tampa this year. And remember, going all the way back to the offseason before 2024, leading through free agency and up to the draft, Evan and I continuously talked about how the Bucs were built for an actual Super Bowl run in 2025. This is one of those pieces that helps make that happen. The Bucs still believe that Reddick can be an elite edge rusher, and that last year was more circumstance than ability. When you take a look at the way the edge market was shaping up, Garrett got a record-breaking contract to stay in Cleveland because apparently winning does not mean as much as he said it did. Crosby had a record-breaking contract 3 days before Garrett broke that record to stay in Las Vegas. Khalil Mack, he decided to stay with the Los Angeles Chargers right before the negotiating window opened. Bosa is basically down between the Niners and the Dolphins. So the edge market had started to thin out really, really quick before teams even had a chance to start speaking with some of these guys. Now, Haason Reddick was the NFL on Fox's 21st overall ranked free agent. On PFF's free agent rankings, he was 12th. By the way, Chris Godwin was 4th. So based on the PFF free agent rankings, the Bucs got 2 of the top 12 free agents available. This is a really, really good signing, and it's a great deal for the Bucs. I'm not going to go so far right now as to say it was a great signing, but Haason Reddick is really, really good. You just hope that the Bucs are right, I'm right, many of you are right in believing that last year was an outlier and not indicative of where his ability is at this point in his career. I still think they draft another edge in the first 2 days, but it no longer has to be the first round. It still could be, depending on who's available, but edge rusher is no longer the biggest need on this roster anymore. You have your top 2 guys in Reddick and Yaya Diaby. You have Chris Braswell in the rotation. You still have Marquise Watts and Jose Ramirez if Todd Bowles feels that they have grown enough to be inserted into that rotation on a more regular basis. And then you're drafting a guy and potentially still signing a depth edge rusher, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before we go any further, it's also worth mentioning, of course, that we got to give the big man his love. The Bucs agreed to a 3-year, $22 million deal with guard Ben Bredeson, and I absolutely love this. Bredeson came to the Bucs last year in a competition with Sua Opeta for the left guard job, and he won the job by default. Remember, Opeta went down with, I believe it was an ACL injury during training camp. It was during their indoor practice. And then Bredeson goes out and has the best season of his career. And what I love even more is that they're keeping the entire offensive line intact, allowing them to continue to grow together for at least another season. And I can promise you this, Bucky Irving is real excited about this signing after some of the holes that Bredeson opened up for him to run throughout the 2024 season. Bredeson allowed a 0.5% sack rate last season, which was the 3rd lowest rate among guards in the NFC with at least 600 pass blocking snaps. He allowed just 3 quarterback hits the entire season, which was tied for the 3rd fewest in the entire National Football League among guards. Jason Light said in a statement, quote, Ben arrived here last season to compete for a starting role, and he capitalized on that opportunity by establishing himself as an important part of our offensive line. He really came into his own playing alongside Tristan Wirfs, and his veteran presence played a role in Graham Barton's rapid development. Ben's emergence led to the overall improved play of our offensive line, and we are excited to keep that starting unit together. End quote. Going to jump into the chat one more time here before we hit the next break. Demon Hunter says Nelly will probably also be back. I'm not going to go that far yet, but I think it's definitely in the cards. I know that was one of the guys that Evan said he believed was going to be gone. I do think it's possible that Anthony Nelson does return to this team. Destined for greatness says, I think it's a win for both sides. Reddick has a lot to prove, and if everything works out, he gets paid next year, and the Bucs are winning. I agree 100%. He's basically on a prove-it deal. You know, if he had hit free agency after the 4-year run that he had prior to last season, he's making, $20 million. He's making more than Khalil Mack is. I can tell you that. Khalil Mack, 1 year, $18 million deal with the Chargers right before the negotiating window opened. He's making more than that. But again, the Bucs get a great deal on a guy that is 6th in the NFL in sacks since 2020. So over the last 5 years, I fully expect him to bounce back and be a double-digit sack guy again this season. I also believe that his presence on the field is going to elevate Yaya Diaby. It's going to create better opportunities for him. And then, of course, playing next to Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea, this defense got a heck of a lot better on Monday with just the signing of Reddick. They're not done yet. They still need more help on the defensive side of the ball, but I really, really love this signing for the Buccaneers. Caleb says, do you think we will get Ward? I'm assuming you're talking about Charvarius Ward. And no, he agreed to a 3-year deal with the Indianapolis Colts. So Ward is off the board. I am going to talk more about the free agents that I would like to see the Bucs pursue. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only on iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Wrapping things up here on a live free agent reaction episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And there may have been what seemed like a million players changing teams on Monday, but let me tell you, there are plenty more free agents out there. So who might the Bucs still be looking to bring in? Now, because this is a live show, I was ready to talk about Dre Greenlaw. And as of right now, during this live show, it is 7:52 p.m., and Dre Greenlaw has agreed to a 3-year, $35.5 million deal with the Denver Broncos. So he's out. So I didn't really have time during the ad breaks to do a deep dive on any of these players, but just a couple of players that jump out to me at the linebacker position that I think would be affordable and also solid fits. You have Isaiah Simmons with the New York Giants. You have Eric Kendricks with the Dallas Cowboys. You have, I'm sorry, I just lost him. Oh, Devondre Campbell. Again, that's an older player. He's coming up on his age 32 season. You're not looking for long-term here. You're looking for affordable plug-and-play guys that can come in, start next to Levante David while still having to draft a linebacker. Maybe that's their first-round pick. We could be doing a lot of talking about Jihad Campbell over the course of the next couple of weeks, but there are still some inside linebackers out there that would fit really well in Todd Bowles' defense. So, unfortunately, Dre Greenlaw is no longer an option, but somebody that is still an option, at least I haven't seen that he signed with anyone yet, is Justin Simmons. You had all kinds of nightmares with safety depth last year. I talked about Simmons a few weeks back as being one of my favorite options. He's 31 years old. Again, not a long-term deal, but he would upgrade the back end of the defense. You have Winfield Jr. and Tyke Smith back there right now. Kayvon Merriweather in a pinch. He's more of the special teams guy, but he did get some meaningful snaps last year, played relatively well when he had the opportunity. I still want the Buccaneers to draft a safety, but Simmons brings leadership, experience, and most importantly, that ball hawk skill set that Todd Bowles said that he wants on this defense. He's only going to cost you around $5 to $6 million for a season. To have that much versatility on the back end between those players that can do so many different things, having all those different pieces to be able to maneuver around and create mismatches and opportunities for guys on the defense, I would love to see the Bucs bring him in. As I mentioned, Charvarius Ward is off the board, but there are some corners that could help out. As of right now, Jamel Dean is not going anywhere. So you're going to need someone that can step in and start for 3 or 4 games at least, probably have to come in and play a couple of games for 2 or 3 quarters, if Jamel Dean leaves with an injury, what seems to be kind of a reoccurring thing with him, bring in Jeff Okudah. He has the size that Bowles looks for in corners, and he is going to be cheap. He's much better in zone than he is in man, and that plays into Bowles' scheme a little bit because he tends to run many more zone looks than he does man. And look, I know Okudah has had some issues as of late in terms of his play. He barely saw the field with the Houston Texans last year, but his 2 years with the Lions showed that he can play some really solid defense. Maybe being in a defense that has Levante and Reddick and Antoine and Tyke and McCollum and all these other excellent pieces around him could help elevate his play. And if Dean is sticking around, you don't need to pay starter money to bring in a free agent corner. You just need someone that you know can come into the game, maybe start a couple of games because he has that starting experience and isn't going to completely crap the bed. This is an affordable depth guy that the Bucs would still, need to draft a guy to address the future of the team. A Maxwell Hairston, a Benjamin Morrison, a Darian Porter. Those kinds of guys are still very much in the mix with the signing of a guy like Okudah. The whole idea, as I mentioned a week or so ago, is to fill all of your positional needs in free agency. So you can go into the draft and just take the best player available rather than forcing a pick at certain positions just because you need it. Signing these kinds of guys or players like these allows the Bucs to do exactly that. You've filled out the holes on your roster. You've upgraded at some of these spots. Now you draft and develop for the future so you can maintain being a competitive, playoff contending team for the long term rather than just the short term. And then as far as some more edge rushers, Von Miller is out there. I don't love that. I can't imagine that he's going to get the $20 million that he just got from the Bills. Matthew Judon, again, that's an older veteran guy. Zadarius Smith was just released by the Detroit Lions. Again, an older guy. But, when you're bringing in these older vets with the experience that they have, being able to get them at a more affordable rate, and then you're drafting guys, you use that veteran knowledge. You use that veteran leadership to bring those guys along and help with the development so that it's not all on the coaches. It's also on some of these players, which is why I think that's probably where you're going to see the Bucs focus in free agency from here on out. They're not going to go for the super young guys. I think Isaiah Simmons might be probably the youngest that you're going to get. He's going to be entering his age 27 season. But remember, the younger you get with some of these guys, the more expensive those contracts become. And I think the Bucs are far more focused on drafting and developing while also getting some of these bridge guys with the playoff experience and the NFL experience to help put them over the edge. Going to jump into the live chat one more time before we get out of here. We got, I think I saw, was it Demon Hunter? Demon Hunter said, thank you for doing this live show. Yep, there it is. Absolutely. I'm glad to do another live show. I texted the insiders. I said, okay, who wants to do a live show to react to the Chris Godwin and Haason Reddick news? It was unanimous. Every single insider said, even if they couldn't make it, they were like, yeah, go ahead and do the live because it's going to be a lot of fun. Did I just see David Harrison in the chat? David Harrison, Bryce Hall is a free agent. Josh Sweat went to Arizona. Yep, that is accurate. And also, everybody very politely tell David that James told him so. David took every opportunity he could to talk about Chris Godwin going to the Commanders. Not today, sir. Not today. I still love you, though. I'm looking forward to our live free agent squad show. If you guys love this show going live, we are going to do the Locked On NFL, the squad show from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday. I'll be there. David will be there. I'm sure Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers will be there. We'll have, Locked On Cowboys is usually there. Maybe Ross from Locked On Saints will be there. It's going to be an absolute blast. You guys do not want to miss it. But David, I appreciate you jumping in. I love you, brother. He also says, what up, Rich? I just got done with my own live, so I had to come through and watch the best Bucs pod in the world. Man, you're so nice to me. You are fantastic. And then last one. Let's see. Bry says, Jags fans also took every chance to say Godwin was going to them, convinced they were sticking it to us. They had to settle for our backup center. No, I'm super happy for Robert Hainsey. I absolutely was. I talked about that a few weeks ago, that Robert Hainsey was going to leave in free agency. Tristan Wirfs had said that they all knew that Robert Hainsey was leaving in free agency. And I agree with Tristan 100%. There are not 32 starting centers in the NFL that are better than Robert Hainsey. So going to Jacksonville always made the most sense for him because, number one, he knew he would start. Jacksonville's offensive line was an absolute mess. He was going to come in and be able to start. And on top of that, he knows the offense. He can help bring the rest of the offensive line up to speed. It was the perfect fit. Really excited for Bob out there in Jacksonville to get that opportunity to have a starting job. So congrats to Robert Hainsey, Locked On Bucs veteran guest. So that is going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. And I saw someone else in the chat saying, I want to be an insider, James. Well, just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.